Hi, everybody. The book I reviewed was The Total Money Makeover. As the slide indicates, it was written by Dave Ramsey. I started in on the book that I got from the library and quickly realized that it was an older version. So I picked up the third revision, which was actually done in 2009. And when I was picking that up, the staff at the bookstore indicated that according to their computer, another revision would be coming out soon. Now, I don't know if that means in 2013 or if it just means someday. But the most current version right now is 2009. The author does indicate what his degrees are in. However, he says these are secondary to his own personal experiences in financial management and what he's learned from those experiences. He also indicates his professional, basically his resume: real estate developer turned finance coach, speaker, author, and radio personality. This book is very much about what to do with money rather than what to do with money. It's about how to do it. So Ramsey started writing and speaking about finances about 20 years ago after his own personal financial setbacks. His first book is titled Financial Peace, and in that book he talks about what to do with your money. And in this book he makes the distinction that this one is all about how to do it. The book is peppered with testimonials, myths versus truths, Dave Ramsey's shocking statistics, dumb math, and worksheets and examples. So the testimonials are dozens of personal stories related to the different concepts in the chapters throughout the book. An example of a myth versus truth, Dave says, "I'll just file bankruptcy and start over. It seems so easy." And right below it, the truth is, in his words, bankruptcy is a gut-wrenching, life-changing event that causes lifelong damage. So there's many examples of that throughout the book. An example of a Dave rant is, savings without a mission is garbage. Your money needs to work for you, not just lie around. The shocking statistic example that I pulled out: 88% of college seniors have credit card debt before they even have a job. And the dumb math and stupid tax examples, one of those that he shares is the eternal car payment. This is under dumb math and stupid tax. Most people carry a car note for their entire lives, paying about $495 a month. That same amount invested from age 25 to retirement would, on average, amount to more than $6 million by age 65. You do the math. So these examples are just to get people thinking. What I found about most of those pullouts is that it wasn't new information, it was just more food for thought. And it certainly did reinforce the content of the book. There are lots of worksheets and examples in the book itself, and there's also a companion workbook that I noted on the last page of my slides that I'll show you in a minute. So Dave's motto, which he highlights at the bottom of every page in the book, is if you live like no one else, later you can live like no one else. And this book is about making sacrifices now to meet your immediate and long-term goals. This emphasis on his proven plan to financial fitness actually reminded me a lot of Barbara O'Neill's book, Small Steps to Health and Wealth. And most of you might know that Barbara is on the faculty at Rutgers University. And her book, Small Steps to Health and Wealth, we've seen a lot in extension because she has an extension appointment. And like Small Steps to Health and Wealth, these concepts that Ramsey puts forward, they're not new, they're not revolutionary, but they do indicate kind of an action plan, including the why and the how for the various concepts. But primarily about making sacrifices now to meet your immediate and long-term goals. Chapter highlights. He opens with several chapters on laying the foundation for the 7 chapters on his what he calls baby steps, which is the real meat of the book and really outlines the Ramsey strategy that he is sharing in the book. As the chapters progress, Ramsey reinforces the need to be very linear in this approach. So step 1 must be in place before you ever get to baby step 2. So if something comes up and you need to dip into your emergency fund, you're going to stop doing whatever you're doing under number 2, debt snowball, and work backwards to refund that emergency fund. There is no timeline for each step or for the completion of the process. It's totally dependent on the family members, their goals, and their level of commitment. So looking at the chapter that starts the baby fund, or baby steps, it's all about the emergency fund. And he's indicating that if you have a household income of less than $20,000, you really should have an emergency fund of $500. If your household income is over $20,000, you should have a readily accessible emergency fund of $1,000. The next chapter is the snowball, debt snowball, and to me, when I was reading that, that's all about power pay. He has his own opinion about which bills you should attack first, and if you're familiar with power pay, we're looking at, do you start with least interest, highest level of interest, smallest debt, largest debt, all those kinds of things. Ramsey has his own theory on which one you should start with. But the whole idea is power pay. So when one of those bills is paid up, you take the money that you've been budgeting for that particular expense, throwing it onto the next debt that you're going to attack. That's the snowball, or in more extension language, the power pay concept. Once you have all your debts eliminated, probably with the exception of your mortgage, he moves on to the emergency fund, which is going to be fully funded when you're at 3 to 6 months of your expenses. And he's very adamant about the fact that this is not 3 to 6 months of your income, but 3 to 6 months of your expenses, because you won't have any debt except for maybe your mortgage at this point. So you're just looking to have 3 to 6 months of your day-to-day living expenses put aside. And then we move into retirement, followed by college funding. Then you're going to pay off your mortgage, so you have no more payments, no more debt at all. And then following that, you will be able to build wealth and give. And that is a very, very high value for Ramsey, and it's very evident in the book. So when I think about the book, I loved the testimonials in this book. I love to see people succeed. I love the feel-good stories. But on the flip side, the book concerns me because of the tone. I think it would be very, very easy for people to feel like a failure if this process didn't work for them. Many of the people that I work with, I think, would grab this book hoping for the fix or the cure. Even if it wasn't a quick fix, they still might expect that they could pick this up, follow it, and in many, many cases, find that the results aren't exactly what they expected. To make the Ramsey process work, it absolutely requires self-discipline, a very high level of motivation, and definite agreement among all those in the household. So whether it's a partner, a parent, a spouse, whoever it is, even your children, everybody's got to be on board for this process to work. And obviously from reading the testimonials and Ramsey's belief in this project, I do see how the book could help people who follow the process. It could result in less financial stress, and it could also give them much more financial freedom. I mean, think about it if you didn't have any debt. So in conclusion, I thought the book certainly shared practical information, but readers might want to use that as just one source of information, and then consult other sources, do more reading, talk to other people, and just weigh what they're learning and how they want to get to their goals, using a variety of sources. So Dave Ramsey has his own website that talks about the books as well as the live programs that he does apparently around the country during the year. There is also a specific site related to My Total Money Makeover. The workbook is a great companion to the hardcover book. And then Financial Peace University is what I think from what I was able to gather locally and from the websites, I think what a lot of the churches are discussing. Any questions or other observations or experiences with this book?
This is Barb, and when I was reading through the book and noting the examples, many people were getting second and third jobs, and we have people with second and third jobs up here, but a lot of it is just to make ends meet for the bills that they currently have. And so when you say that you're not, or that the family really has to be committed to the whole process, I agree.
Right. The author made it sound like in many of the cases where they were picking up a second or third job and supplementing family income, that was just a real short-term thing. But Barb, a lot of the families that I work with, if they're fortunate enough to have one job and they can find a second job and still be parents, still be caregivers, and still be participating in their family life, those are tough things.
Bruce, this is Carol. Just wanted to chime in a little bit. The church I go to, actually, they've been offering Financial Peace University. One of the teachers is a school affiliated with the church, and they've been having this, I don't know how many weeks it is, it's like 8 or 9 weeks, so it's obviously based off his books. And they get, I wouldn't say a huge attendance, but enough that they offer it. And I do want to say that couples are going to this together, as you mentioned, to make this work, so I see that as well. And I also wonder, with the last point that you had on the previous slide before, the resources, the last point was build wealth and give, and I think part of it, I haven't participated in it, but at the same time, I think anything is better than nothing. And just building that wealth and giving, they're trying to put that in perspective, and obviously part of what churches ask for then are, offerings or whatever, to be part of their giving too. So it's an interesting combination, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I worked with a woman who attends the church where this is being offered in our community, and the spending plan outline that I use has donations and gifts at kind of toward the bottom, and we actually redid the spending plan outline for her because of the expectation that it's 10% first. And then we worked out the rest of her spending plan with her values in mind. But I thought that there was definitely the feeling on her part that she needed to do that first.
I have the next book coming up with Your Money or Your Life. So the official title was The 9 Steps to Transforming Your Relationship with Money and Achieving Financial Independence. And a slide I have near the end shows all 9 of those steps. The authors are Vicki Robin, the late Joe Dominguez, and Monique Silford. And it's in its 3rd edition, came out in 2008, was the last one. I read this in maybe the late 90s or 2000, 2001, after I saw it on the bookshelf at the Crawford County Extension Office. So it came out in the 90s and then has just been updated and revised a few times. And a key point or a key thread through this whole book is thinking about your money, your income, your dollars, wherever money comes from in your household, as not just about money, but the money represents your hours of life energy, or all the time that you put into acquiring that money. So how long do you have to work for your money? So it's trying to get people to look at their spending from the equation of, this isn't just about the little green pieces of paper, this is about where I put my life energy and my time. And the book also talks about the 3 FIs. And the 9 steps kind of walk you through each of these 3 FIs together. So the first one is financial intelligence. It's basically figuring out how much money is coming into your house, how much money is going out, where's your money going. So kind of that budgeting, tracking, spending. There's also a point where it has you look at how much money you've made over your lifetime and what do you have to show for it, which for some people that's a step that can just kind of freeze them in their tracks because they don't like seeing that, and a lot of where they put their money isn't reflected in an asset. It might not be reflected. They spent it on college education or travel or other things. And then the next FI is financial integrity. So it's looking at where your income, what's coming in, where your money's going, and then are you happy with where your money is going? And I have to say that second FI, that financial integrity, is something that's influenced the money management and the financial education that I do. Because I always tell people, I could care less where you're spending your money. I just want you to be happy with where you're spending it. And then that third step is the financial independence, about saving and investing for your future. The first few steps focus on the financial intelligence, basically tracking spending and income. So in this book, it encourages you to really take the information that applies to you, personalize it. If something doesn't apply to you, that's okay. So it's know the real cost of work in dollars and life energy. So, for example, it's not just about how much money you're getting paid per hour, it's how much you're also spending for child care or commuting or fast food meals if you're not around to cook. So it's looking at that big picture of how much money you're actually getting for your time. And then really encourages you to personalize your spending categories, just like the example Ruth gave with an individual learner she was working with that moved the tithing to the top. So looking at where you want your money to be going, really breaking it down. And also looking for any patterns you have, any habits, and what they call gazingas pins. Those are those things that all of us might have a tendency to spend our money on, like maybe we have a collection, or things that we're always just kind of gathering more of. Maybe we have a lot at home, but we don't have that color or that size or whatever it might be. So it's all about reflecting on your spending. The next FI was the financial integrity. It's about getting your money's worth. And I had presented some of this on this book at Pathways and a JSEP conference, so I had a couple slides in here. So just to give an example of reflecting on some of where my money goes, I put down chocolate, which maybe I should reflect on where a lot of my money goes. And then to look at your spending, to see if you're happy with it, look at how much money you spent on whatever item you're tracking, how fulfilling that item was for your purchase. So let's say I bought some chocolate and I would see, okay, I spent a little, it was okay. I bought a little more, spent a little more, and it was better. Maybe I bought some more, spent a little bit more, and it wasn't as good. And then I go through my week or my month or a few months and I buy a lot more. So the point of the financial integrity is looking at where all your money went and then reflecting back. So I remember that money I spent around Easter for that Hello Easter Bunny. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't that exciting either. Then there was the lab coat guy when I went into one of those fancy chocolate shops where all the chocolate was behind a glass case, and he comes out in a lab coat with a silver tray of chocolates, which they were good, but they were a lot of money. And then I found the kind that I really like. And for me, that maximized how much money I could spend and live with myself and getting enjoyment from it. So it's all about reflecting back on where your money went to see if you were happy with it. And they call that the fulfillment curve. So we all need the basic survival. So we all need to spend a certain amount of money or have a certain amount of money on that food, shelter, clothing, transportation, whatever that might be, comfort. Then we start getting into wanting a little bit more above and beyond the basic survival. And then as you go up the fulfillment curve, spend a little bit more money, we get into some luxury. So maybe you have a reliable car, but maybe now you got a car that's a little bit nicer, or a new car, or has heated seats, or whatever it is that you feel is a luxury. Then you can spend more money, and you can add on more luxury. Whatever it might be, a fancier car, a better car, whatever that might be. And so this book encourages you to look at, for the money spent, where you feel like you're maximizing the money spent for the fulfillment you're getting from it. And it also had to kind of reflect back a little more so than needs and wants. So when I look at it more of a fulfillment curve when I'm talking to people about their money than just the basic needs and wants. Because that you get to start splitting hairs between, is that for survival, is that for comfort or luxury? It's such a personal decision that people need to make that for themselves, and it's more based on, what do they feel they need to survive or comfort or get that maximum luxury. So in this book, it looks at having too many luxuries as it just starts to become clutter and weighing people down. If people feel like they're getting enough, they have enough to take care of themselves and a little bit extra, they're enjoying their money, they're in life, that's where that fulfillment curve comes in with tapping out at the enough. And that kind of is reflected on some of those surveys we see about happiness index, and that people who make the middle class range of income seem to report more happiness than people who are making less money, obviously, and then more happiness than people who are even making more money. So then the book encourages you to ask yourself 3 questions about spending, because it's all about reflecting back on your spending. The first question, as you look at your spending, you ask yourself and your partner, if you have a partner there, did I receive fulfillment, satisfaction, and value in proportion to your life energy spent? So it's not just about the money, it's how much that money represents of the time you put into it. Then the question to reflect back on, is this expenditure of life energy in alignment with my values and life purpose? So it's all about connecting your spending to your values. Is this what's important with me? Is this in alignment? Is this where I want to be putting my money? And then the question is, would I spend my money, life, energy in this way again? So it's learning from your past spending. Okay, if you went out to a new fancy restaurant and spent the money, well, was it worth the money? Did you have enjoyment? Or did you just have a night out at a fast food place and it's about being together as a family and you save a little bit more money? And that way you can be conscious of your spending for next time and realign it with your values. They also have, for people who are a little closer to retirement, another question for number 3, saying, will your expense go up or down in retirement? So starting to focus on how much money you would need to live a fulfilling lifestyle in retirement. So with the fulfillment curve, they encourage everyone to get in touch with living to a point where they feel like they have enough, whatever enough looks like for each person, and then getting rid of that clutter. So realizing when you've hit enough with your spending, and then stopping there, and then moving beyond that, you can go up and think about saving, you can think about giving, volunteering, and that's where the financial independence also comes in. You get to a point where you have enough money coming in to support yourself and you're able to save for your future and perhaps maybe even give back. So with that financial independence, when you hit enough, then the book really encourages you to look at paying down debt. When you feel like you have enough to live the life that you want, then start looking at debt, which I'm assuming would make Dave Ramsey cringe because he wants people paying down debt before then. And then it moves on to looking at where to stash your cash if you're looking at saving and investing for your financial security. So the very last part of the book talks about savings, short-term, longer-term, and then investment. I will say that when it comes to that last part of the book with the investments, the key features of this book, I think, are really for personalizing your spending and that process of reflecting back on where your money went. If I was looking for a book on investments or savings vehicles, this probably would not be the book I'd be looking for. It's very has a bent to be very conservative, saying put your money in government savings bonds and really safe investments for the long term. And that, again, may not be right for everybody. So in terms of the investing portion of this book, I probably wouldn't hang my hat on that section. Just an overview of all 9 steps for people who are interested. You can find this on their website, just walking through the spending, the reflection, and then thinking. And a couple websites, financialintegrity.org has free tools for your money or your life. They have free community resource guides, handouts for people who are doing book clubs or reading circles. That simpleliving.net, the guy running that website just stopped running it, but there's a link to a discussion board for people who are following your money or your life steps, those 9 steps. So if you're interested in more information, that's places to check out or start with.
Although I haven't read the book, I like the concept that we're looking at kind of like the value of your time and how it relates to how you spend your money. And I know we have that discussion here a lot. It's like, okay, if we're going out to lunch, how many hours are we going to have to work to pay off that lunch? Or it could be to make that car payment, or to make that the rent or mortgage payment. And it's just an important way to look at it, how the money is being spent.
So why don't I turn it over to Christy, who's going to do our guide to surviving debt.
Thanks, Peggy. So I thought that I would share with you guys a book titled A Guide to Surviving Debt. And you'll see on the slide there that the book is put out by the National Consumer Law Center. And the principal author of the edition that I'm spotlighting, which is the 2010 edition, was the principal author for both 2010 and 2008. And you can see that the National Consumer Law Center likes to share some information about the book, and that quote that I have at the top of the screen from Stephen Brobeck says that this is the best book available for consumers in financial trouble. Well, there's certainly a lot of financial self-help books and information out there, so I don't know that I can say that it's the best book, but I did find that it was a really helpful text for me to go through. I learned a lot through the process. And the reason I decided to go through this book is that in 2011, I was fortunate to be awarded a FINRA Investor Foundation Fellowship, which allowed me to enroll in the accredited financial counselor program through the Association for Financial Counseling, Planning, and Education, also known as AFCPE. So as a participant in the accredited financial counselor program, I completed 2 educational courses. The first one was titled Financial Counseling and Debt Management, and the other one was titled Personal Finance. It was during the Financial Counseling and Debt Management course that I was exposed to this particular book. And I got to admit that I read this book rather carefully as being a part of a course. I had a study guide that I had to fill out, and I was also really trying to make sure I took in a lot of information because there was an exam that would also go along with the course. So despite all of that, I really felt that I learned a lot, and there were a lot of topics in this book that I personally hadn't had previous exposure to, and some of those topics were around the areas of student loan debt, repossessions, foreclosure, and bankruptcy. As we look at this next slide, you can see that this book is divided up into 7 major sections. Each of these sections has a number of chapters of the book that support that theme area. And you'll see there that the first one is very basic in talking about understanding your options. And as I started off with this book, I felt very comfortable, and it made a lot of sense to me because understanding your options really has 3 chapters that go with that. And that includes deciding which debts to pay first, budgeting, and then the credit report, which all tend to be areas that, in my experience with Extension, are areas that we program in or do teaching on. So again, I felt that this was a nice intro to the book, but then as I progressed on into some of these other sections, I really got into content that I wasn't as familiar with, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. So that second chapter, Making Sensible Choices, that gets into having people explore what some of their options might be. So debt relief companies, credit cards, home equity and refinancing options, and raising money to pay debts, which again I just thought was really interesting. I would say in that section in particular, the consequences or some of the things that go into a refinancing decision I just thought was really interesting. You'll see the third section there, debt collections and collection lawsuits. The fourth section, home foreclosures. The fifth one, I mentioned this a little bit earlier as well. I really felt there was a lot of information in this fifth section. There was probably 6 or 7 chapters that were under this area. So this focuses on, again, the student loan piece, federal income tax collection, evictions, utility shutoffs, repossession, and then other threats to personal property. Just a ton of information in there and very helpful. And then the last 2 sections, bankruptcy, and then getting back on your feet, which that last section includes a checklist and some things for folks to think about as they explore that kind of next chapter of their financial future. So the reason that I thought that I would share this book with you is I really think there's some useful information in here that might be helpful, background for when you do a extension program, or might help you to be a little bit more comfortable when questions come your way. I know that I can testify to the fact that I recently taught a Money Smart and Head Start debt workshop, and there were a number of people in the workshop that really had a lot of questions regarding student loan debt, and I just felt a lot more comfortable about some of the things they were asking, having this additional background. So prior to this book, I certainly had the experience of, holding or owning student loan debt, but not necessarily, how to approach it if you were experiencing financial trouble or, some of those backgrounds. So, one of the things that comes to mind here is just the difference between a deferment and a forbearance. So, I don't know about all of you, and I won't ask you to weigh in necessarily, but for me, prior to this book, those terms seemed really similar, and this really helped break it down. So I have an additional slide up here with the choosing which debts to pay first, and I have some hot links on here if you're interested in clicking on those. So as I mentioned, this book really kicks off with the 16 rules about which debts to pay first, and it really approaches this idea from, I would say, a legal standpoint. So, if you were to decide which debts to pay first, certainly there's some personal preferences and influences that come into play, much like what Ruth was talking about working with the person in her office, that certainly we might have a preference to tithe or do other things first, but when we're in a situation of perhaps having inadequate income to cover all of our debts, we might be in a situation where we're weighing the consequences of not paying certain things and letting some things go. So these 16 rules really help answer these questions from a legal perspective. Certainly the consumer would make their own decision about how to prioritize these things, but some nice background about which ones should I pay, what are the consequences if I can't pay, should I seek counseling, should I file bankruptcy. And what was interesting as I got into this section of the book is it seemed really familiar to me as I was reading this, where it was just like, wow, I feel like I've read this before, and yet this book was new to me. And so one day I was chatting with Peggy Olive, and she mentioned that this book was used as a source in developing the UW extension dealing with a drop in income publication. So I just wanted to make that point, too, that if you look at the UW extension publication dealing with a drop in income, which I've provided a link for, you'll see, again, the relationship between this text and the UW extension publication. And what I'd really suggest is that the book that I'm spotlighting would be a useful resource and reference background, if you will, for educators, but the UW extension publication would be an excellent handout for consumers. And hopefully everyone online has already seen this, but in the off chance that we've got some new folks joining us, I just wanted to put a plug in for that because it's a really nice publication that's out there for you to use with folks in your county. And then the National Consumer Law Center does give some suggested uses for this book. Certainly I've been sharing my opinion on how you might use it, but it's touted to be a resource for financial counselors, a resource for attorneys, a self-help book for consumers. And I would say that some of the things I really like about this book are that it has a detailed index. I would say, as an aside, it's my pet peeve sometimes when I have books on the shelf that I know I read something in and their index is so poor I can't get back to it without rereading the whole thing. It also has a really good glossary of the terminology that's relevant throughout these particular topical areas. It's got a list of helpful websites, and it also includes some additional budget forms. And if you want to read more about how to use the book, I've given you a hyperlink to the National Consumer Law Center's suggestions about how you might use this text. And then finally, I just wanted to point out again that my comments are in relation to the book that I read, which is the 2010 edition. The reason I read that edition is because it was the most current version when I was going through the Accredited Financial Counselor program in 2011. They have updated this, and the 2013 edition is now available. And you see from the slide, the claim from the National Consumer Law Center is that it's a definitive consumer guide and has been fully updated. You can check out the table of contents and the index. I do not yet have the 2013 edition, but I would expect, again, it builds on and updates things in the text that I have, and I would suspect that the changes have to do with evolving law in this area because, as I mentioned, this really comes from a legal perspective. So I would suggest that this is a valuable resource book that you might want to have on your bookshelf and might want to peruse for some background in certain areas that you might not be as confident in. And I would open it up for questions.
Christy, is this book only available through the National Consumer Law Center? You couldn't pick it up at, or could you pick it up at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, something like that?
I believe it is on Amazon as well.
Okay.
I didn't provide the Amazon link just because if you go to the National Consumer Law Center website, they have a lot of additional links to explore the 2013 edition, which you don't get on Amazon, but yes, you can definitely buy it through Amazon.
Okay, thank you, Christy. I see Colin has his slides up, and we'll turn it over to Colin O'Rourke to cover Pound Foolish.
Hi, everyone. So, as Peggy mentioned, the book that I read is Pound Foolish. The subtitle kind of sums up the direction it goes in, Exposing the Dark Side of the Personal Finance Industry. It's by Helene Olin, who is the Pathways conference keynote speaker in a couple of weeks. And she's a journalist. And the book is a broad critique of the financial services industry. It's not really a how-to personal finance guidebook. And it's gained significant media attention. It came out in late 2012, but it's likely makes claims that many will think are controversial. Some of the themes are that the personal finance industry is too focused on individuals rather than societal or political problems. So the personal finance industry, almost by definition, since it's focused on individuals, doesn't focus on things that are potentially more important, such as income inequality, falling median incomes, Olin's thinks that we have claims that we have a thinning social safety net. The industry promotes personal finance as a knowledge and smarts problem rather than a social justice problem. And then the book talks a lot about the increased risk that households are exposed to, even higher income households. And then she also critiques many of the people, including Dave Ramsey, Sue Zorman, and many others who work in this area, saying that often they're telling people to cut their spending except on my books and workshops. So these people are profiting off of others' interest in learning about their personal finances. There are pervasive conflicts of interest in the finance industry. So Many people believe that the, say, insurance salesmen or others that they might be involved in have a fiduciary duty, meaning that they must act in the client's best interest, but that's really not true. That the standard that people follow is a suitability standard, which is much more lax. Basically, is the product a decent fit for the consumer rather than is it the best fit? So this means that people who are selling mutual funds, insurance, other finance products are really profiting off people and potentially not connecting them to the best products to suit their needs. And then that the pressure to keep up leads people to engage in harmful behaviors, including things like day trading, trying to time the market through picking stocks and flipping houses, things like that. So to go back and just go over some of the chapters, one of the early chapters is a sharp critique of Sue Zorman, basically that Sue Zorman promotes an approach that is too focused on individuals. She gives conflicting advice, contradictory advice, just a very broad critique, although I would say it's not as specific as, it's not very specific. It's just pretty broad. And another chapter is called The Latte is a Lie. It's based on this idea that if we would give up a latte, we'd save $5 a day, and then if we assume that we do that over 40 years, we'd all become millionaires. Olin argues that this is a lie, that for many people, for about half of Americans, they have no money left over for savings, and that this idea that we're spending money on frivolous things is just white noise, and that the real problem is the increased fixed costs, such as housing, healthcare, and education, that those are the real problem, not lattes and other frivolous expenses. And then she also criticizes Dave Ramsey, David Bach, who's another well-known author in this area, and others. And then a later chapter is really on the financial literacy industry, and it's called Elmo is brought to you by the letter P. And I guess that chapter really isn't about Sesame Street, although she does critique that, because Sesame Street recently has gotten into the area of promoting personal finance, and a lot of this is funded by industry that she thinks, that Olin thinks has a conflict of interest. But the chapter is more about the financial literacy in general, and she says that financial literacy is driven largely by industry, and she thinks that this is kind of self-serving, and that what the industry could really do is just make products and forms and so forth that are less complicated, but they don't do that, but instead they just fund these financial literacy efforts. Olin talks about the research on financial literacy, which is potentially not as strong as sometimes we think, that there's only weak evidence of the effectiveness of financial literacy, and only very motivated individuals show up, so we'll never reach the vast majority of Americans through those efforts. And then one of the last chapters is called "We Need to Talk About Money," and the quote that I have here is one of my favorites. That we have a virtuous minority talking about how the rest of us are messing up our money. So kind of this idea that the personal finance industry isn't speaking to the general public, is just a kind of elite few who are very critical of the masses. The book really doesn't give many or really any recommendations of how to fix things, which is I think one of the major critiques of the book that I've read. But I went on her website, and she says that she did it on purpose, that she was purposely short on suggestions, but she does list the 10 that I have here on her website. And one that she's really been in the media recently about is 401k fees. She was just on a PBS documentary a few weeks ago saying that the fees are too high, and that it's over time those fees accumulate and really take away from the retirement savings of Americans. And for more information, she has her website. There's the Pathways website, which again, she's the keynote speaker for that conference, and that website will likely have more information in the coming weeks. And then some of the books and movies that she mentions are Maxed Out, which is a 2007 documentary about increasing consumer debt. And then the book that she thinks is the best about personal finance, best kind of guidebook, is it's Personal Finance for Dummies. And then The Great Risk Shift is a book by a professor, Jacob Hacker, which explains or argues that over the past several decades, financial risks, so outliving your money for retirement and things like that, have been shifted from businesses and government onto individuals, so that the Great Risk Shift is kind of the evidence for much of what she argues in the book. So I'll end there, and let me know if you have any questions.
We do have additional resources on our media collection, like that Maxed Out. We have that DVD is available on the media collection. I think there's a few other DVDs that probably might even be old videos. I don't know if they're still in there, on some money management. Seems like our theme with all four of these books is just getting many different angles and opinions. Any other thoughts or takeaways from the Swiss line? Okay, well, if there's no other thoughts or other takeaways, we do have, Libby went ahead and posted a reading list with several other books, and we'll see if we have more we can add to that from our poll today. And thank you to our presenters also. Have a good rest of your week.